5 years after a cop vanished, his dog returned with a message. No one expected. Welcome to our storytelling channel, where every story holds a deeper truth. If this tale touched you, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We rate everyone. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss tomorrow's story. It's one you won't want to miss. It started on a quiet, rainy morning. One of those mornings where the world feels like it's holding its breath. The sky hung low over the small Georgia town, its clouds swollen and gray, releasing a steady drizzle that tapped gently against the windows of a white cottage at the edge of the woods. Inside, Maryanne stood in her kitchen, wrapped in a thick cardigan, fingers curled around a warm mug of coffee. At 53, she had grown accustomed to the silence. Her children were grown, her husband had passed nearly a decade ago, and the days blended together like mist rolling across the hills. But that morning, something was different. As she stepped out onto the porch to sip her coffee and watch the rain, she caught movement near the front gate. There, just beyond the iron bars, stood a dog. Large, soaked, and motionless. A German shepherd. He didn't bark or whine. He didn't pace or approach. He simply stood there, head high, body still, eyes fixed on her with an expression Maryanne couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear, it wasn't aggression, it was something else, something quiet and heavy, like he was waiting. The sight of him tugged at a memory. Her husband, a former K-9 officer, used to describe this exact stance, alert, grounded, steady. It wasn't how strays carried themselves, it was how trained dogs did. But this one looked weathered. His fur was matted, his ribs faintly visible beneath the wet coat, and his paws were caked in mud. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days, yet somehow there was dignity in the way he stood, as if he'd known purpose once and had not yet forgotten it. Maryanne slowly placed her mug down on the porch railing. She didn't call to him, didn't ask him to come closer. Instead, she went back inside and prepared a bowl, roasted chicken from last night's dinner, brown rice, and a touch of warm broth. She walked back out into the rain, opened the gate just wide enough to place the bowl down, then stepped back. "You look like you've seen too much," she whispered. The dog didn't move at first. Then slowly, with the deliberate pace of someone who had learned not to rush, he stepped forward. He sniffed the food, then began to eat, cautious, silent, and composed. Maryanne stood watching, raindrops soaking through her sleeves. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, arms folded, and watched him eat like she was witnessing something sacred. When he finished, the dog lifted his head and looked at her once more. Their eyes locked, only for a moment, but it was enough. Enough for her to know that this encounter wasn't random, that this dog wasn't lost, and that perhaps, just perhaps, he was right where he was meant to be. Then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the woods across the road. That night, Maryanne barely slept. The next morning came quietly. The storm had passed, but the air was still heavy with moisture. Clouds thinned just enough for light to filter through, soft and silver, casting long streaks across Maryanne's wooden floor. She moved slowly through the house, a mug of tea in hand, still thinking about the German shepherd. She had told herself it was just a one-time encounter, a passing soul needing a meal before disappearing back into whatever shadows he came from. But deep down, a small part of her hoped he'd return. Not because she needed company, but because something about him had stirred something she hadn't felt in years. Connection. When she opened the front door, her breath caught in her throat. He was back, sitting tall and still on the porch, soaked to the skin once again, as if he'd been waiting for hours. But this time, he wasn't alone. At his side, wrapped in a torn piece of dark cloth, was something small. Maryanne's heart began to race. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped outside, letting the screen door creak shut behind her. The German shepherd didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, steady, calm, like he knew she needed time to understand what she was seeing. She knelt down, her knees creaking with the movement, and reached toward the bundle. That's when she saw it. A police badge, worn, scratched, dulled by time. And next to it, shivering under the folds of fabric, was a tiny puppy, barely old enough to stand, let alone survive whatever journey had brought it here. It whimpered softly, and Maryanne's eyes welled with tears before she even understood why. She picked up the badge with trembling hands. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, and for a moment the world stopped. She knew this design, she knew the weight of it. Her husband's badge had looked just like this. But when she turned it over and saw the name engraved on the back, the mug slipped from her other hand and shattered on the porch. S. Whitaker. Shawn Whitaker, her husband's former partner. The young cop who had gone missing 5 years ago during a routine search and rescue op. No trace had ever been found. Not of him, not of his K9. Until now. She looked up at the dog, her voice barely above a whisper. Is it really you? Rook? The shepherd didn't blink. But then, as she rose shakily to her feet, he lifted one paw and placed it gently on her arm. It was deliberate, like an oath. That's when she noticed the cloth tied around his leg, another piece of torn uniform, soaked but intact. Maryanne's hands shook as she untied it, revealing a small plastic-wrapped flash drive. Her mind swirled with questions. Why now? Why her? What had this dog seen? And why had he brought it all back? One thing was certain. This wasn't just a visit. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Maryanne stood frozen on the porch, the flash drive still clenched in her trembling hand. The cold from the plastic casing seeped into her skin, but it wasn't the chill that made her breath catch. It was the weight of what it might contain. Rook had brought it to her. Not just the badge, not just the puppy, but this, something he had protected for years. And now he was trusting her with it. She looked down at the tiny puppy, still curled up under the fabric near the shepherd's paw. It whimpered again, barely able to lift its head. Without thinking, Maryanne scooped the pup into her arms and cradled it against her chest. It felt weightless, fragile. No more than 5 pounds, bones pressing gently against her palm. It's okay, baby, she whispered, her voice cracking. You're safe now. Rook followed her into the house without hesitation. He stepped across the threshold like it meant something, like it was more than shelter. Maybe it was. Maryanne gently laid the puppy near the fireplace, wrapped in a soft towel. Rook settled beside him without a word, guarding him like a sentinel. The firelight flickered across his dark coat, illuminating the mud stains, the scratches, the scars of time. She moved to the old desktop computer in the corner of the room, a leftover relic from when her youngest son used to play video games. After school, she hadn't powered it on in years. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, she inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered to life. One folder, labeled, for her. Her throat tightened. She clicked. Dozens of files blinked open. Videos, audio recordings, Word documents. Some were dated as recently as weeks before Shawn Whitaker's disappearance. She hovered over the first video and hit play. The screen filled with his face. Shawn, unshaven, eyes tired but smiling. Barely. If you're seeing this, he began, voice steady but worn. Then Rook made it to you. Or someone with enough heart did. I had a feeling this mission wasn't going to end right. Something felt off from the beginning. Maryanne leaned forward, unable to breathe. The glow of the screen reflected off the tears brimming in her eyes. I'm not going to get into details here. Not yet. But if things go sideways, I've trained Rook to do what I couldn't. He remembers. He always remembers. The clip ended. Maryanne stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a goodbye message, it was a warning. A breadcrumb trail left behind by a man who knew he was walking into danger, and who trusted his K9 more than anyone to carry the truth. She glanced at Rook. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a messenger, and he hadn't just wandered back to her porch. He had come with purpose, with something the world had tried to bury. The question now wasn't just what had happened to Shawn. It was, who wanted it hidden, And how far would they go to keep it that way? Maryanne barely slept that night. The puppy whom she'd started calling Scout was curled in a soft blanket by the fire. Rook hadn't moved from his side. Not once. He didn't sleep. He didn't blink. He just watched, like he was guarding. Something only he understood. And maybe he was. Maryanne sat at the kitchen table, the flash drive still plugged into her old computer. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees along the property line. She clicked on a second file, this one labeled Journal, April 7th. Rook and I spotted another symbol carved into the tree line today. Same one we found last month. I reported it again, but no one's listening. They think it's just bored teenagers messing around. I know better. Rook knows better. Her eyes scanned the rest of the entry. A chill spread down her spine. Today, we found a shredded uniform buried under leaves down by the creek. It had blood on it. The badge number was still visible. Maryanne's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her mind reeled. None of this had made it into the official report. Shawn had been marked missing in a river accident, swept away during a storm, they'd said. Case closed. But this journal told a different story. She opened another file. April 12th. My backup got reassigned. No notice, no explanation. Now it's just me and Rook out here. No radio signal in half the zone. I can't prove it, but I swear someone's trying to isolate us. Keep us from digging too deep. Her stomach turned. All those years she'd questioned what really happened. The gut feeling she couldn't explain. The silence when she called the department for answers. She thought she was paranoid. But now she knew the truth was never meant to come out, and someone had gone to great lengths to bury it. She printed the logs, each entry, each badge number, each GPS coordinate. Her hands were shaking as she marked them up. She traced the coordinates on an old map she found in the drawer. The locations formed a trail through the deep woods beyond the creek. It wasn't just random. It was a path. Maryanne stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed her phone. There was only one person she trusted with this. Detective Carla Monroe. They hadn't spoken in years, not since her husband's funeral. But Carla had been different. Tough, no nonsense. The kind of cop who didn't look the other way when things didn't add up. The call rang twice. Then, Maryanne, wow, what's going on? Maryanne didn't waste time. She laid it all out. Rook, the badge, the flash drive, the journal. Everything. There was a pause. Then Carla said, "Don't say a word to anyone else. Not your neighbors, not your friends. I'll be there tomorrow." Maryanne hung up the phone and looked across the room at Rook. He was still there, watching, waiting. He hadn't come back just for peace. He came because something was still out there. And now, someone else knew. Detective Carla Monroe arrived just before noon the next day, her SUV kicking up gravel as it pulled into Maryanne's drive. She stepped out like she hadn't aged a day, boots, badge, and that no-nonsense stare that used to make rookies snap to attention. Rook was already at the front window, ears up, eyes locked on her like he recognized the authority in her stride. Maryanne opened the door. "Thanks for coming," she said softly. Carla nodded once, eyes flicking to Rook. "You weren't exaggerating," she muttered, stepping inside. "That dog's trained. Classic K9. "He's more than that," Maryanne replied. "He remembers." They sat at the kitchen table, files and printouts spread between them. Carla leaned in, reading each line of Shawn's journal. With every entry, her jaw tightened. "None of this made it into the original report," she said at last. "Back then, we were told it was a freak accident. Flash flooding. They said he must have been swept away." "They lied," Maryanne whispered, her voice barely audible. Carla looked up, her eyes sharp. "Yeah, they did." Outside, Rook paced slowly across the yard, nose in the air, his movements deliberate. Scout followed close behind, still clumsy on oversized paws, blissfully unaware of the tension thickening around them. "Those GPS points," Carla said, tapping one of the maps. "They lead way off the grid. Deep woods. Looks like a trail. Possibly a dump zone. If those uniform pieces were buried, we might find more." Maryanne hesitated. You're not going alone. Carla raised an eyebrow. You sure? I've spent 10 years in silence, Maryanne replied. Not anymore. They packed what they needed. Copies of the files, food, medical supplies for the dogs. Scout stayed behind, wrapped in blankets by the hearth. But Rook jumped into the back of Carla's SUV like he'd been waiting for this drive his whole life. The path into the forest was rough, just narrow tracks winding between tall oaks and pines. Carla drove slow, hands steady on the wheel, eyes always scanning the tree line. The farther they went, the quieter it got. Not a single bird call, no wind, just the soft crunch of tires on dirt and the occasional snap of a twig in the underbrush. After nearly an hour, Carla pulled over beside a broken fence post. This is it. GPS says about a mile in. Rook was already out of the car, ears alert, body low, moving ahead like he knew the way. They followed. Through the woods, over moss-covered logs and under hanging vines. Rook never hesitated. He weaved through the brush with eerie certainty until he stopped cold at a small clearing choked with weeds. At the center, a mound of disturbed earth. A crude pile of rocks. It looked like a grave. Oh my God, Carla whispered. Maryanne stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. Beneath the stones lay a stained piece of uniform. And a second badge. Another officer. Another secret. Rook sat beside the makeshift grave, silent still like a soldier standing watch. And in that moment they knew. This wasn't over. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide the past. But now, the past had a name, a witness. And Teeth, if this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we'd love to hear from you. What part hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Rook returned with that tiny, trembling puppy? Or when Maryanne found the badge and realized her late husband's partner hadn't just vanished, but had left behind a silent witness with a message of truth? Let us know in the comments. Your reactions, your thoughts, or even your own stories of loyalty and second chances. We read every single one, and your words help build a community that believes in the power of courage, memory, and redemption. And tell us, where are you watching from? We're always amazed by how far these stories travel and how deeply they resonate with people around the world. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Because sometimes the quietest messengers carry the loudest truths. Now it's your turn. Share your voice below. We can't wait to hear from you.